Steam's new rule changes everything, and Valve, at least from their perspective, had no choice but to implement. So here's what's happened. Last week, Valve quietly added Rule 15 to Steam. They used to have 14, now there are 15. And this 15th rule bans content that payment processors don't like. Now, this is not illegal content. It's just content that Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal find to be objectionable. And here's what this means. It means that Valve no longer controls what is on their platform. The payment companies control that. And if this kind of thing sounds familiar to you, it should. Countless platforms like Patreon have experienced similar. And then just after we finished the body of this video, well, the hammer blow fell on itch as well. There's a lot going on. On Steam, though, to just stay focused on that for now, what just happened is that hundreds of games just got pulled. Developers got a $100 credit as compensation, and this is just the beginning. We're going to see way more, and the situation is that the people impacted are furious. The fans are actually quite scared, quite worried, but the people who pushed for this change, they are happy, they've had success, and they are not planning on stopping. I've also got big news for the thousands of you who have visited and used our sponsor, Boot.dev, and that news is TypeScript. If you know what that means, you know it's pretty huge. The entire backend learning path is now playable in TypeScript as well as Go. It's funny, Lane, the founder's tweet, basically just reads, "Fine, you win. We've capitulated to the way of soy because enums." And if you're wondering why you should care, well, TypeScript is Microsoft's vastly more powerful JavaScript, static types, fearless refactors, editor autocompletion, lots of lovely things, which is why Google, Slack, and Airbnb use it in production. It lets you catch bugs while you're coding instead of, when the server's on fire. TypeScript's awesome. Now, Boot.dev wraps all of that in the power of an RPG. That means quests, XP, boss fights, real-time leaderboards, community, all of that. You get to enjoy that while you're wiring up databases, building REST APIs, deploying to the cloud, and now doing all that with TypeScript. And by the time you finish your learning path, you will have a portfolio full of back-end projects. You'll have the confidence to dual-wield TypeScript and Go in any gig, which is going to be huge for employers. And there's a bit of a hack to save you the most money. Boot.dev/Bellular News, code Bellular News gets you 25% off with your first purchase. But what you can do is buy the yearly plan for the largest saving, because, 25% of a bigger number is a bigger number. And if you don't gel with it, well, just use the no-risk 30-day money-back guarantee. Okay, let's talk about what actually happened. Steam used to have 14 rules for developers. We actually just looked at it recently in this video, but now there's a 15th rule. So here's the new rule. Content that may violate the rules and standards set forth by Steam's payment processors and related networks and banks or internet network providers, in particular certain kinds of adult-only content. That's, the thing you can't do. Now pay attention to the wording here. May. Not does violate, just may violate. And what's key to understand is this goes beyond the existing rules. As an example, Rule 3 already bans mislabeled adult content. Rules 6 and 7 ban illegal content and shock value material. So what's Rule 15 for? Well, it's for content that previously was allowed by the other 14 rules. Content that is now retroactively banned. And here's how the rule played out. Eagle-eyed users spotted a change. SteamDB's removals list basically exploded overnight. Hundreds of adult-only games vanished, especially games that, we will call not involving consent or involving family members, right? The sort of thing that many people would find to be extremely distasteful, but that in the setting of like a fictional thing for adults is not illegal, at least in every jurisdiction, right? And that's the bit that's interesting. So yes, this is unpalatable content to some people. It's illegal, though, in a few jurisdictions, which we'll address later in the video. But here's what matters, right? Not all of these games are illegal. What this was a blanket removal. And you may say that in theory, Valve is complying with the law, except they're not. This is not about the law. This is about third-party pressure, not legal compliance. The reason why is, payment processors. The admission. Valve admitted everything in a statement that was sent to Rock Paper Shotgun. They said this, quote, "We were recently notified that certain games in Steam may violate the rules and standards set forth by our payment processors and their related card networks and banks." Again, not do breach, just may breach. That's a through line here. So responding to this, Valve pulled all of the games. They notified the devs, offered the $100 and called it a day. You might be thinking, God damn, you didn't even put up a fight? Well, yeah, they didn't. And there's a reason why they just called it a day and caved so quickly. The brutal truth is that without PayPal, Visa, MasterCard, Steam kinda dies, or at least a lot of its revenue goes away. I mean, think about it. Visa and MasterCard control, didn't make this up, 69%. Of global credit cards. It's a pretty high percent. They dominate debit cards in the US as well, and lately they've been flexing. They've been cutting off other businesses, and if they drop Steam, that would be game over. Valve can't just go and create their own payment network. Can you imagine dealing with the infrastructure, the regulatory compliance for all the different regions? It would be a nightmare. So Valve are trapped. But you may notice something's been left out. We know that it may be the guidelines of the payment processors. We know that Valve is worried. But who's actually driven this issue? The Agitators. The Aussies. Yep, the Aussies have done this. Thanks, lads. Basically, right? An Australian group called Collective Shout claimed a big victory here. Basically, they sent an open letter on July 11th. It targeted PayPal, MasterCard, and Visa directly, and it got 1,067 supporters to basically email these companies, which is not a lot, but it was enough. Now, they claimed then that they were subject to misogynistic abuse online for being involved in doing this campaign, and it was loud. A lot of people looking at this basically just said, hey, you censorious bastards, go away. You don't get to just impose your whatever values on the rest of us, especially not the rest of the world if what you're basically doing is trying to go for the payment processors. Now, look, I am not making a claim that you should like all of these games, right? Or that you should find them palatable. No, I am not. What this is, though, is a policy discussion, one that actually does impact all of us. Now, what they were pushing for, I think to a lot of people, is an overreach, certainly a risk, certainly worrying. As always in the internet, there is a small percentage of people who go way, way too far in not liking something. That did mean that they, would be able to take, that's a misogynistic message, that's an angry tweet. They could just take all of those things and actually use them as further proof that they are being subject to misogynistic abuse online. And this would just further their argument, make it stronger, make it more emotionally resonant to the people at, say, MasterCard and Visa, who themselves are probably just worried about getting negative press. Now, let's go more into this group. Who are Collective Shout? Well, Collective Shout described themselves as, quote, a grassroots campaign movement against the objectification of women and the sexualization of girls. They've been active since 2009. Their targets range quite widely. This is from actively illegal stuff to just content that they simply find to be distasteful. And they've taken on legitimately unsavory products. Tate Brothers, for instance, they try to challenge sexist advertising, they boycott some films they don't like the 50 Shades of Grey stuff, but they've also went to target mainstream gaming, like, say, Grand Theft Auto. They actually got GTA pulled from shelves in Target and Kmart in Australia. And in that case, it was on the grounds of violence against women. In an open world game with a whole bunch of characters, if you just go beat people up, yeah, you can do that. You can say, oh my god, look at this terrible thing in the game that I just did and recorded. Interesting. Now, they also went for Detroit Become Human for the same thing. Other campaigns against that game all failed. But it is clear that, they're able to pick up wins. I mean, even in Steam, they've got wins, and this is not their first win on the Steam platform. They've complained about multiple Steam games before. Some got pulled individually, but this July, things have been different because they changed tactics, where instead of targeting Valve, they just went straight to the payment processors. Which, look, if you're a political operative, definitely say that's a smart move, right? Go above and above and have a massive impact. That's what they decided to do. And these are companies that have caved before. As an example, take a look at Tumblr. They banned all adult content after payment processors threatened them. PayPal has actually dropped ebook sellers over, let's just say, non-vanilla content. Non-vanilla content that is legal. That's the thing. And this is basically the playbook, and it's one that has just worked on Steam. But here's the thing, I kind of just misled you. I did it though for a point, so let me explain. It is true that their campaign against Tumblr worked, and that yes, Tumblr just went to pull down all the prawns. But part of what sealed the deal for Tumblr was heaps upon heaps upon heaps of actual child, abuse content, material, CASM, I believe it is called, in the press. Now, the Tumblr was, or cheese pizza is often what people would say online. Now, that Tumblr was a disgusting cesspool that was riddled with that actually illegal, just about everywhere content was essentially an open secret on the internet. Tumblr was absolutely asleep at the wheel. They did not do a good enough job of policing their own platform. And because of that, I honestly can't say I'm surprised that payment processors wanted nowhere near it, because the facts were that content existed there, and a lot of, the maps, they congregated there. Okay, let's bring us back to Steam though. So, Waypoint's Anna Valens reported something interesting here. She flagged that Valve does actually put extra scrutiny in adult game submissions. For just one example, a game got rejected for inaccessible files that, quote, might feature underage characters. So, was illegal content really getting through all the time with Steam? I would say probably not in most cases. But it did happen once. Steam did have one major slip-up, and Collective Shout exploited that brilliantly. Do you remember a game called No Mercy? It released in March, and it featured, quote, non-consensual domination of family members. Collective Shout mobilized against this game. 3,000 emails were sent to Gabe Newell, 70,000 petition signatures happened, and here's the crucial detail. That content was illegal somewhere, just not everywhere. Where it was illegal was the United Kingdom and Australia, and actually under relatively new laws. Now that does mean that under Valve's own rules, that game should not have been sold at all in those regions. But Valve didn't act for 5 days. They only acted after international media coverage. I mean, the UK government even commented in that case. Now, eventually the developer pulled it entirely to avoid causing Valve more problems. This, of course, gave Collective Shout ammunition. They could just point to No Mercy and they could say, see? Illegal content can get through. The implication was perhaps that Collective Shout over-egged their claims, perhaps mixed the potentially illegal in some regions with content that they simply find distasteful. Never mind the basic fact that most of the removed games were not illegal in all territories. But the narrative stuck. The waters were muddied because of this No Mercy thing. Groups like Collective Shout can just point to an event like No Mercy being pulled, and they can use that to convince payment processors that other illegal content might be there on the platform. Because all they really need to do is convince a large company that, look, it's happened before, it could happen again, you don't want that risk, you should pressure them. That's how this kind of thing goes. This story, though, does actually hit rather differently when you know a little bit of the history in the background. You see, back in June 2018, Valve actually made a promise. They said that anything not illegal or trolling was actually allowed. Now, this came after backlash over adult game removals. They specifically said that they would not cave to payment processors or to interest groups. But here, 7 years later, they have done exactly that. They've just went and pulled games that may violate payment processor rules. And remember, that is the wording of Valve's new Rule 15. May, not does, may. Now you might think that may is just a very woolly, non-specific word. I would actually argue that here, oh no, may is a very, very specific word. They're using it because, well, it might not, but we don't want to run the risk of getting the proof. That's the specific language. It's a rule directly designed to give Valve preemptive permission based on their interpretation of other people's rules, but not anything that's actually deeply fought over or proved in any sort of objective sense, or at least one that would lead to like a common societal or legal whatever consensus. And in a way, that's scary. What's next? I mean, will developers see these mysterious rules before they go and submit their games? If people can find success over things that they find distasteful, what does that mean for other types of games? What happens when payment processors change their standards again? Because they will change them again. What matters is the Collective Shout just proved that the formula works, the plan works. Just over 1,000 emails alleging illegal content forced this change. Not proving, just alleging. That's a low bar and a low number of emails. And here's what really worries developers. Payment processors have targeted queer and minority content before. It often would get flagged as adult only in a disproportionate way. And in some instances, as an example in YouTube, it would simply just be because of who is making it and the sort of topic they're talking about, not necessarily what's in it in any way that, say, if it was just normal basic hetero stuff would even be targeted, right? So that's been awful. It's happened in YouTube. A lot of those people are also worried about this, not just, big team Goontown who just wants to have Steam Gooner games. But guess what? gets worse. So as we recorded all of this, we saw further proof. itch.io essentially descended into chaos. The site had to de-index any content tagged as adult from their browse and search pages. That effectively takes it out of the public eye. It kind of removes discoverability. Now, they posted a blog that explicitly tied this to Collective Shout and payment processors. In their own words, quote, "This is a time-critical moment for itch.io. The situation developed rapidly, and we had to act urgently to protect the platform's core payment infrastructure. That essentially meant they had to act as fast as they could and then deal with talking to developers later." And what's happening now is the company are auditing their entire platform to review content that, would be against the standards set by these payment processors. Standard devs will now have to sign off as sort of meeting all these requirements on their pages. And again, these are not legal requirements, these are just the rules of payment processors, not the rules of itch. And it's any game that could be adult, right? Could. The not safe for work tag doesn't just mean FAP. It doesn't just mean nudity. It can be a lot of other things. And here's what's wild. The game count on itch went from 28,000 games to under 7,000 as of this morning, right? That's 21,000 games. Award-winning artistic titles are being hidden and being pulled, all while the devs impacted by this cannot pull their funds from the site while their accounts are under review. In a way, it's itch's fault, but they kind of feel like they have to do this. I mean, compared to Valve, itch is absolutely tiny. Percentage of Steam's traffic. But itch isn't Steam. As a distribution platform, many of their pages are for art, books, non-commercial games, right? Both digital and tabletop. Especially, they have pretty, good penetration into the LGBT side of things, who maybe can't distribute through other channels, so they're also disproportionately impacted by this. So basically, kind of no matter where you are in the spectrum, this isn't particularly good for you. And for the people making this, well, they are just in limbo, their livelihoods cut off. So it's not surprising that they're kind of not willing to take this shit. It's funny, the internet is an extremely divided and divisive place, but if you're to make it a Venn diagram and you're to put in a circle that just says Homo sapiens that get kind of horny, guess what? That covers almost everybody. So I'd at least hope that this could be an instance where people who perhaps wouldn't normally be on the same side of an issue can maybe band together, because it does actually impact everyone, because it's about the shared rules of the game. And that's what leads me to developers of not safe for work games trying to fight back. They are preparing a petition to the United Kingdom government. One of our members from Bellular.games passed on this statement to us from the petition. They want legal products to be protected from payment processor censorship. But of course, the big question is, will this matter? Because in 2018, Valve said they would defend creative freedom. In 2025, they won't even fight. I mean, Gabe, my boy, even Tim Sweeney's more of a goddamn fighter. Look at him! Dude just went to crack open Google, and, even though it was really self-serving, he did actually succeed in cracking open a lot of Google and Apple. Just kind of ballin'. Shame about the whole exclusivity thing. Anyway, the message is pretty clear here. Any content that payment processors find objectionable could be next. So, look, it might start on a transfery game and a, sort of gooner game in Steam. Maybe two separate bits of the thing. It may start there. But what if it continues? I think we can see that sort of thing continue. Again, the laws that a bunch of this stuff isn't actually allowed per in the UK and Australia, those are relatively new laws. So we should actually think about the direction of travel here. You may not like something or agree with someone's, actions or whatever, but the law that hits them could hit you in ways that you don't necessarily have the capacity to predict, because we can't look into the future. That's why thinking about the more baseline systems is actually what's important here. Because at the end of the day, in almost all of our societies, what's the point? The point is, well, laws are made up that are ideally via some sort of democratic process. That's the sort of stuff that people think they should be beholden to. Now, a private business has, of course, the right to do business, whatever way they want. That's okay. But what happens when a private business becomes such a large foundational piece of infrastructure that you cannot get around them? That means that whenever PayPal, MasterCard, Visa, and other providers pretty much all agree and are very worried about their big corporate interests, about trying to defend their position as infrastructure by cozying up to governments, well, what way do you think they will end up being biased? But to bring it back to Steam, Steam being the place where anything goes as long as it's legal, is now dead. The spirit of it's mostly alive, but it is literally dead. Here's the thing. Once you become a platform that's large, you become a kingmaker. You hold a lot of power. If you invite not safe for work people onto your platform, you are saying, hello, we're inviting you over here. We are going to do business with you, and that would be great for all of our shared customers. You're safe here. Do business with us. Trust us. Well, if your processes are not tight enough to defend that space, say to let illegal content in, as Tumblr kept on doing, well, you basically betray all of those people that took you on good faith. And that means you are breaking your end of the bargain. Valve have done that here. And there's a reason why it's content like this that ends up being the sparking point. It's carnal. It's animalistic. It's topics that people feel, right? It's fears that people hold, and fear magnifies. As today shows. It only took 1,067 emails orchestrated by a group that knows how to play the system in a country far away that doesn't have much to do with most of the people watching this channel, yet it impacts global Steam. That should be worrying. And even better for Collective Shout, it's self-sustaining. That's because pushback, insults, and perhaps abuse that they get from people who have been angered by all of this, guess what? That just gives them more fuel to do corporate jujitsu on risk-adverse multinational corporations who want a good quarter, no risk, no bad quarterly report dramas. As for Steam, well, the bar is low and the language of their rules is worryingly vague. It's not the only legal problem Steam has got. Oh no, there's another big one. We'll be covering it shortly. But for another policy issue that impacts you, well, how about this? The idea that Sony have potentially engaged in monopolistic practices and price manipulation to systemically overcharge you for video games by destroying market principles. That's the allegation, and you can learn about the story in this video next.